Hello folks, T's Daily and back with you. Thanks for joining me. And today's video we're going to have a look at the Klee sequencer, and this is a standalone piece of software you can find. It's not too expensive if you can buy a license for it. I think it's worth it. It's cool in that it's a step sequencer, but it's really quite unique, and I think it's often overlooked. Like, it's not widely used in software, and it's actually based on a hardware sequencer of the same name. Nowadays most commonly found in Euro format, but yeah, it's been around for a little while now. But yeah, it's interesting, and as I was saying, it's really quite unique in that you can have more than one active step running at a time. And you might be thinking, what the fuck does that mean? You know, how does that work? So we're going to have a look at this, and I'll explain how it works, and we'll go through the parameters and how they all work together and how you can use it. So we'll start just with an overview of the sections and try and explain this, because it's not obvious at first how this works. Okay, so you have these two groups at the top with 8 steps each, laid out very much like a typical step sequencer. Okay, and then under that you have this bus assignment section with these 3 bus assignments, and these are per step, so you can effectively route each step of the sequence to one of these 3 buses. Okay, but then down in this output section we have these different behavior types for the 3 output buses, and these determine how the steps interact with each other as their output to the bus, like to their respective bus. So I'll try and explain that a bit as we go along. Okay, so moving back up to the top again, you can see there's 2 groups, A and B, of 8 steps, and they can work independently. As you can see here, 8 by 2, and then we can actually join them together into one 16-step sequence, and you can see the numbers on the B section have now become extensions of the first 8. So what you need to do with this particular sequence, when you create a pattern, it doesn't automatically update as you tweak or adjust the parameters. So I guess we'll get a sound happening, and to do that there's a number of ways you can use this. You can use it as standalone, which I'll demonstrate firstly. So first of all, we're going to want to set a behavior for the output bus. We'll just use the first output bus for now, and we'll just simply assign each step to the first output bus by clicking each of these assignments. And now with this buses section, we can go to the first output bus and select where we want to output the MIDI to. So working in standalone mode, you get 3 plugin assignment slots which you access in the setup menu. So I've loaded instance of Repro 5 from you here in the X plugin slot, and that's going to be what we use for now. And so I now just go to plugin X, and that should be now working. So I'm just going to assign the first step, and do that by clicking these what would you call them, like selected steps or active step buttons. Okay, so we've activated the first step now. Okay, so the dials under each step still work without actually having the steps activated. So these are kind of independent of the activated steps. So once you've loaded a sequence in, you need to hit the load button for that to become active. So now we'll just play, and we haven't actually set a behavior for the bus, so we're not hearing anything yet. So we'll just use the A. So it just means that all the A values are going to be routed to the first bus. And if we want to use these second set of 8, we need to assign the B steps to the first bus. Might be better in the 16-step mode. You might find it more useful to use either the A plus B values, which means the B values, step values, are added to the A values, or the B minus, or the A minus B values. So it's just the opposite. So the B values are subtracted from the A values, and that's not really going to become apparent until we start activating more steps. So it might be simpler for now just to run an 8-step sequence, and we'll just look at the group A for making that clear. So go back to gate bus 1 on A, and you can hear now there's 2 steps active, but we haven't hit the load button to load the active steps. So now you can see these 2 LEDs scrolling along, which means that these 2 active steps are running. So what happens with the 2 active steps is that their values are summed together. So you can see whichever steps the sequencer is set on, as it progresses, the 2 steps where the LEDs are lit will be summed together, and that can be as many active steps as you select. So if you just have the single stage, you can just see it's very much like a typical step sequencer. If we add another active step again and load, you can hear the sequence change, because these 2, well, the stages where the 2 LEDs are occupying will be summed together. And a third. So effectively what this means is you can make very small changes to these, but your significant changes to the output of the sequence. It's often hard to predict though, however, so don't be put off by that. I find that's one of the actual strengths and what makes this particular sequencer both unique and exciting to work with. You're not quite sure what it's going to do, and it's a real happy accidents machine. So as long as you work with that in mind and use it, you know, along those lines, you'll find it most enjoyable. And there's really nothing else like it that I know of. You know, like it's sort of similar to a Turing machine, and it's kind of similar to a shift register, but it's not. It's quite unique. So I recommend exploring it. Yeah, I'm just gonna go through some more of these other parameters we have down here. So the pattern can be set to random mode, where each step's value is randomized more or less, and that is really unpredictable. Like you just can't tell, as with any random source really. You can load the pattern from an external MIDI source. You can invert the values of the B steps or stage or group, and actually not sure how this gate bus one load button works. I've never really used it, but might need to look at the manual for that. So the clock section is pretty straightforward. It can run on its own internal MIDI clock or an external MIDI source. You can load the pattern on hitting the play button instead of having to use this load button, and adjust the tempo and the clock division, all pretty standard stuff. Now these L to R or R to L buttons determine the direction the sequencer runs in, so whether it's left to right or from right to left. And again, we can adjust the pulse width with this section here, just the pulse of the gates. So I'm not sure if this will... you can see that's really shortens the decay. Open it right out. I like nice little plucky sounds, so just leave it at that. Again, you can have 3 separate sources active at a time, but you can only have the step can only be sent to one of the buses at a time. You can't send it to more than one bus at any one time. So if you want to have rests in your sequence, it's just simply a matter of routing the step to a different bus and maybe not having that active, or so. Load that now. You just need to be careful if you have several active steps. You may still find, even having that step routed to a different bus, you may have another active step present at the same moment, which means that it's still going to produce a sound. So it can be a little sort of like I was saying, it's hard to predict, but it's just a matter of working with it. And I'll move on. We have this quantizer section here, so we can quantize the MIDI output values into these scales defined here, and there's a whole selection of scales and modes, key signatures. all the common scales that we use. And then we have the chord mode, which means it runs polyphonically. You can have up to 6 notes active, 6 voices active, and that can, you can offset each of those to the, well, it doesn't even need to be the root. You can select any kind of configuration of notes as you like, but you can, we'll just set 3 sort of random notes and we'll see what that sounds like. So it's not much there, but if you've picked the right notes and scale, it can probably sound pretty nice. So turn that back off. So, just demonstrating. And okay, the output section I've pretty much kind of gone through. We can change the range of these dials, so from 1 octave, major third, so it's only 4 semitones, perfect fourth, 5 semitones, perfect fifth, 7 semitones, minor sixth, 6 semitones, and then we can go to 1 octave. And typically you probably use the octave modes most commonly. You can customize it, and you just edit the values here, but we won't bother with that. So we'll go to 2 octave mode, and so you can see how small tweaks actually have pretty significant impacts on the sequence, which really is what makes the clay exciting, I think. Okay, so we'll move on. We have the presets load and save section here. You can save presets in there. It's all pretty standard and straightforward. And then the setups page, where you can define all your preferences. You can have MIDI controllers and the audio mixer for each of your assigned plugins. So I guess we'll move on to using this with a host, or routing, more accurately routing the output into a DAW. So I'm using Bitwig obviously, and we're gonna drop I'll just use a polysynth here. I'll put the Bitwig polysynth on this instrument channel, and you will need on a Windows computer, as I'm using here, some way of routing the MIDI from one application to another. So I use the Loop BE virtual MIDI cable application. There's several that are available that all do this kind of thing. MIDI Yoke, I think, is one, and I think there's a few others, but I use Loop BE. It works well. It's free. There's a one channel free version. You can buy a can pay for a license for a more comprehensive version. It gives you access to all 16 MIDI channels, but we're working just with this single channel virtual MIDI cable, so that allows us to route MIDI out from the clay. And to do that, we go back over here to our bus section. Instead of running it to the onboard plugin X, we choose the MIDI cable, virtual MIDI cable, Loop BE internal MIDI, and now in the host we go into the MIDI inputs of the instrument track and select the Loop BE internal MIDI, and now we should effectively have voila, the Klee now is sequencing this polysynth in Bitwig. So I've just set this now to 16 step mode. Cool, we can invert the values. So as you can hear, you know, spits out some pretty interesting patterns. Now obviously if you use an external clock source, you can add groove and swing, shuffle, all that to the clocks and make it more groovy. So I won't demonstrate that for now, but that's a possibility. You can make it patterns run the opposite direction. And so you get the idea. Actually, we need to stop in the Klee. I'm thinking it was a plugin, but no, it's separate. So there you have it. That's a somewhat comprehensive overview of the Klee sequencer, and you can check it out on Defective Records website. And I highly recommend it. I reckon it's heaps of fun. Like I say, there's nothing really else like it. So go and check it out. Yeah, I'm going to leave it there. There's not much else I can say about it. So yeah, hopefully you've gained some insight and helpful stuff. And thanks for watching. I'll see you in another video soon. See ya.